Now, an independent investigation into the former conduct of former Reform UK MP Rupert Lowe has found there is credible evidence of unlawful harassment towards 2 women by both Mr Lowe and male members of his team. OK, well, let's speak to GB News political editor Christopher Hope to make sense of this all. Christopher, what has the KC said then?
The report is here. It's about 14 pages long, released by Reform UK about half an hour ago. Now, let's remind viewers what happened here. Rupert Lowe is the MP for Greater Yarmouth. He was stripped of the whip on the 7th of March, accused by Zia Youssef, the party chairman, of threats of physical violence, accused also of bullying, his office bullying 2 members of staff. He had done an interview with the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, our colleague, saying that he compared Farage to the Messiah, calling for reforms in the party. He completely denied the allegations and said they were a put-up job, and they said that it was unfair to him. Reform then commissioned a KC to do a review of what was said about him, and the report was just dropped. But I'm trying to go through Rupert Lowe's response. It looks like about 1,000 words long. But in summary, it says here, the Independent King's Council, paid for by Reform UK. This is a report, of course, commissioned by Reform. There's no legal basis of this report, although a KC, a senior barrister, has done it. The first allegation she has found about Rupert Lowe was that there was credible evidence of unlawful harassment of 2 women by both Mr Lowe and male members of his team. That's the first finding. I should say that on that point, Rupert Lowe tells me it's absolute rubbish and completely wrong. That's the first finding. Secondly, contrary to Mr Lowe's statements, the KC has found one of the women's allegations were made against Mr Lowe himself. That's the second finding. That also is denied by Rupert Lowe. He says no. The third finding is that one of the women received threats that Mr Lowe would take legal action against her if she cooperated with this investigation. That is said to be drivelled by Rupert Lowe this lunchtime. And the fourth point is that both women gave their statements to the KC as sworn statements under penalty of perjury. Mr Lowe has refused to do the same. Now, from Mr Lowe's point of view, he says to us that, in fact, he was given until tomorrow as a deadline to respond to this report. They say that there's been no bullying by him or his team, and they say that this is just grossly unfair to put this report out before he's ready to respond to it.
And yet this is a respected KC who has written this. Reading between the lines there to Rupert Lowe's response to you, it seemed as though he didn't deny the fact he was refusing to cooperate with this investigation, refusing to put a statement forward under the threat of perjury, unlike the others who were involved in this.
It's not very clear how perjury can apply to a statement to a KC. Right. It's not a criminal court, this. It's simply a barrister paid for by Reform UK to look into a matter. So it's not really the same as... it hasn't got the weight of a perjury issue in the court. But this battle goes on and on. I mean, there is simply... I guess all that matters at the end of the day is, will this guy go back into Reform and boost their MP numbers by a fifth to 5? It looks like it won't happen from this. There is clearly a huge falling out. And this Casey's report, judging by the response from Rupert Lowe we're going through right now, they are nowhere near resolution.
Yeah, and Rupert Lowe on Twitter, very outspoken, very long statement there too. Clear he continues to deny any of this, of course. But he also says, this is all a malicious attempt to smear my name because I dared to question Farage. Yes. So essentially continuing to say this is a political hit job.
It's on screen now. In part of it, we won't read all of it out, he says that mildly inappropriate comments made by one member of casework staff in a private WhatsApp conversation with another member of staff who had gone on to leak elements of this doesn't constitute bullying. So it's about what is bullying. He's saying no wrongdoing here. The KC has found otherwise.
Well, this is an almost he said, she said situation, except it does seem that in that statement, Rupert Lowe has said, well, there was something that could be interpreted mendaciously in a WhatsApp chat, although he doesn't think that reaches the bar of bullying. I suppose this is a really difficult position for Reform UK because they cast themselves as the party of free speech, of no-nonsense Britain, of grow a backbone, have a stiff upper lip. Yep. And then they say, well, a bit of bawdy banter, as some might describe it in a WhatsApp group, is enough to kick someone out of a party.
That's often the way, isn't it? I mean, again, and Rupert Lowe, some critics of reform think that Rupert Lowe was challenging Nigel Farage with that interview with the Daily Mail. And of course, these allegations were made about Rupert Lowe before that Mail interview appeared, although the police complaints happened on the same day it came out in the newspaper, so it's not really clear. But as I say, the politics of this, for me, aside from this huge falling out between a senior MP and the rest of his party, is they look a long way from making up.
And where does this go from here, then?
Well, we wait to see Rupert Lowe. Well, Rupert Lowe's put a response out now on Twitter as we speak, so that's happened. I think the two sides are irreconciled. I mean, Rupert Lowe still wants to have dinner, I think, with Nigel Farage. That's how two men of over 60 make it up nowadays. That may happen, but I think a lot of water has got to go under the bridge before that can happen.
But in terms of any police involvement?
There is a police... You're absolutely right. Separate to the claims about the two women, there are complaints being looked at by the Met Police into whether Zia Youssef, the chairman, was threatened by Rupert Lowe. Right. That is separate to this altogether.
OK. Well, Christopher Hope, thanks so much for going through that report so quickly and diligently for us. Of course, there'll be much more on this channel with regard to this issue throughout the afternoon and indeed into the evening.
Well, in other news, the Home Office has announced that it is no longer working with the main provider of migrant hotels over its alleged poor behaviour and poor performance.
While Stay Belvedere Hotels provides a quarter of accommodation for asylum seekers, it's being replaced by the company behind the Bibby Stockholm barge.
Yes, curious. We're joined now by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. I believe you're with the Shadow Home Secretary.
Yes, I am indeed. Good afternoon from College Green. The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, was speaking in the House of Commons a little bit earlier and joins us now. Thank you very much for talking to us today on GB News. This government, you said you'd stop the boats, you didn't. This government said they'd smash the gangs. They didn't. What do you make of the figures where we are now? We've had nearly 6,000 people make that crossing this year alone.
Yeah, well, the last government in 2023 did start to get the numbers crossing the channel down. But what's happened since the election is the numbers have gone into reverse. They've started going back up. They're up by 31% since the general election. Nearly 30,000 people have illegally crossed the English Channel. And as you say, this year alone, just in the last few weeks, 6,000 people have illegally crossed the channel. That is the worst start to any year in history. It's the worst year ever. So the Labour government's claims to be smashing the gangs are in complete tatters.
They would say that they are processing people more quickly, that they're returning people out of the country. Do you give them any credit for that at all?
Not really. Most of their returns are voluntary to Eastern European countries. Only a tiny, tiny fraction of the number of people they are returning actually arrived here by small boat. And in fact, that number has gone down since the election, not up. And the number of people they're returning who arrived on small boats, it amounts to about 4% of crossings. They're letting 96% of these illegal immigrants crossing the channel stay here in this country. And let's be clear, they are illegal immigrants. They're entering the UK illegally. And they're not fleeing war because there is no war in France. France is a perfectly safe country. France has a well-functioning asylum system. Nobody needs to get into a rubber dinghy and go from France to the UK to flee a war. If people want to seek protection, they're perfectly able to claim asylum in France or indeed in Belgium or Germany or any of the other countries they may have passed through previously. There is no excuse for getting into a dinghy and crossing the channel. And that's why the Rwanda deterrent that the last government was ready to start was so important. That would have seen everybody crossing the channel by dinghy get sent to Rwanda, and it's quite clear that very quickly the deterrent effect of that would have stopped people trying to cross in the first place, but Labour cancelled that scheme before it started. The first flight was due to take off on July the 24th.
On the topic of the grooming gangs, the Conservatives tabling an amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill to force a national statutory inquiry. You're not going to win that vote. What's this about? Is this some sort of political stunt?
No, it's not. We think it's vital there is a national statutory public inquiry into the rape gangs because lots of public officials, councillors, the police, the Crown Prosecution Service and others covered this up for many, many years and deliberately ignored the testimony of victims. And I want to see the public officials who covered this up, or at the very least ignored what the victims were saying, held to account. There's a criminal offence called misconduct in public office, and I think any public official, including local councillors and councils, who turned a blind eye to these rape gangs because they were of predominantly Pakistani heritage, they should be held to account. They should frankly be prosecuted. They should go to prison. Now, Labour's proposal to have just 5 local inquiries simply is not good enough. Firstly, about 50 towns were affected, not 45. Some towns, like Oldham, are refusing to have an inquiry. So that's the first problem with Labour's approach, only 5 towns covered. But secondly, these local inquiries don't have statutory powers, which means they don't have the legal ability to force witnesses to appear, to requisition evidence, to take evidence under oath. And one of these local inquiries in Manchester last year saw the chairs resign because even as recently as last year, public bodies were still refusing to provide evidence. That's why it's got to be a national statutory inquiry. We're going to put it to a vote after Easter in Parliament, and we'll find out whose side Labour is really on.
Thank you, Chris Philp, for talking to us. Of course, the Conservatives were in office for 14 years. You would wonder why, if this is so important, they didn't do it then. But that is the Shadow Home Secretary. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much indeed, Catherine Forster. We learnt quite a bit there. Timing for when this may indeed happen, when this amendment will be laid. It will be fascinating to see how the government respond.